Alright, today we're talking about the addition of real numbers, and there's a couple of different ways we could do it. One way we can show addition with real numbers is by using the number line. So when we're talking about using the number line, what we do is we start on the first number, and then if we add, we move to the right because that's positive. If you subtract, you move to the left. So today we're just going to be adding. So if I start with 4 and I put a little dot on 4, and then it says to add 2, I'm going to hop to the right 2 places. I end up on 6, so that means 4 plus 2 equals 6. If I have negative 4, I'm going to come down here and put a dot on negative 4. I'm going to add a negative 2 to it. Now, if I'm adding a negative 2, that means I'm going to the left 2 spots because it's negative. So I'm going to go 1, 2, so that's going to hit me on to the negative 6. So that would equal a negative 6. Now, if I'm adding a negative again, so if I start on 4, I'm going to add a negative 2, which means I'm really going to the left because it's a negative 2. I end up on 2. If I start at negative 4 and I just add a 2, I move to the right. Up 2 spots, I end up on negative 2. And using the number line is okay, but a lot of times you're just going to end up using the rule, which I'm going to go over in just a second. If we have negative 4 plus negative 6, some of you are visual learners, so that's why I go ahead and show you using the number line, because sometimes it's just easier for some of you to see. So if I'm going to start on negative 4 in this one, negative 6 means I'm going to the left, even though I'm adding. So 1, 2, 3, oh wait, this is counting by 2s. So 2, 4, 6. Sorry about that. So I'm ending up on negative 10. Pay attention to the number line. So you'll know if you're counting by 2s or not. Okay, let's look at the next page. Let's talk about the rules. And so I'm not going to use a number line on these. I'm going to write down a couple of rules. If you're adding the same sign, so that means if I'm adding 2 negatives or 2 positives, we're going to add the numbers and keep the sign. You'll see what that means when we do some examples. If we're adding opposite signs, we are going to subtract the numbers, keeping the sign of the larger number. There's a little bit of a long rule. Alright, so if we add the same sign, we're going to add the numbers and keep the sign. If we're adding opposite signed numbers, then we're going to subtract and keep the sign of the larger number. So if I have a 4 plus 2, don't make this hard. 4 plus 2 is going to be 6. It's the same 6 as you've always had. But if you have negative 4 plus negative 2, those are the same sign. They're 2 negative numbers. We're going to add them and get a 6. We're going to keep the sign that they have, which would be negative. Think about money when we are doing positives and negatives. If I am $4 in the hole and I use my debit card for $2 more, no way am I getting out of the hole by spending more money. I'm getting deeper in the hole. So now I've got negative $6. So you have to think about it that way. Sometimes that helps with money. Sometimes it helps with temperature. If we're at a negative 4 degrees, we go down 2 more degrees. We're now at a negative 6 degrees. So there are different ways to think about positives and negatives that make it a lot easier for you. So let's look at this next one. Negative 9 plus negative 11. There's 2 negatives. 9 plus 11 is 20. And I keep the negative sign. Okay, on the next one, when you've got decimals, you've got a negative 4.1 and a negative 0.53. So we're going to add those, and we're going to keep the negative sign because they're both negative. So negative 4.63. Alright, here's our lovely fractions that I know y'all love so much. Let's practice fractions. We're going to practice this. These have different denominators. So my LCD for 4 and 3 is going to be 12 because 4 goes into 12, 3 goes into 12. So I'm going to put me a 12 down here for each of those. So 4 times 3 is 12. 3 times 3 is 9, and it's negative because it still stays negative. Okay, in the second one, it's also negative. 3 times 4 is 12. 2 times 4 is 8. So I have a negative 9 over 12 plus a negative 8 over 12. Again, the denominator stays at 12. Negative 9 plus negative 8 would be negative 17. So negative 17 over 12 would be your final answer. So the rule that the book will always tell you talks about using absolute values. So to add two numbers with the same sign, you add their absolute values and apply the same sign. I don't talk about doing absolute values. I talk about just the rules that I wrote up at the top about adding the same number, keeping the sign, subtracting, and keeping the sign. So negative 4 plus negative 6, same sign. Add them, keep the sign. To me, that just seems more straightforward and a little bit easier, and I've been doing this a while. All right, so now here's some with opposite signs. You see I have a positive 4 and a negative 2. The sign that sits right in front of the number makes it that sign. So since the negative is right in front of the 2, it makes it negative. So on this one, I'm going to say 4 minus 2 is 2. The 4 is larger, so that means the 2 stays positive. Now look at the difference in the next one. Negative 4 and a positive 2. 4 minus 2 is still 2, but this time my 4 is bigger and it's negative, so it stays negative. Think about it this way. You have a negative amount of money in your checking account, negative $4. You deposit $2. That helps you, but it doesn't get you all the way out of the hole. You're still at a negative $2. Okay, negative 3 plus 10, subtract them. 10 minus 3 is 7. 10 is larger, so I have a 7. I'm negative $3 in the hole. I just made a $10 deposit. That got me out of the hole, $7. All right, 20.3 plus negative 41.5. You're going to subtract those, so negative 41 or 41.5 minus 20.3. That's going to give me, let's see, 41.5 minus 20.3 is going to give me 21.2, and it's going to be negative because the 41 is larger. Alright, here's us another fraction. This time LCD is 10 because 5 goes into 10. I don't have to multiply those together. So I'm going to change the first one to something over 10. 5 times 2 is 10. 1 times 2 is 2. So negative 2 over 10 plus 3 over 10. Again, they're going to stay a 10 on the denominator because that denominator doesn't change on adding and subtracting. Negative 2 plus 3. 3 minus 2 is 1. The 3 is larger, so it stays a positive. Okay. So to add two numbers with different signs, we are going to subtract. I say subtract, and then apply the sign with the larger absolute value. I don't say it with absolute value. Alright, negative 6 plus 3, subtract them. 6 minus 3 is 3. The 6 is larger, so it stays negative. Alright, so let's translate some phrases. The total means to add. So I'm going to need to do negative 4 plus negative 9 plus 1 plus negative 7. Now you can do this a couple different ways. You could group all the negatives together and add the negatives and then add the 1 to them. I like to just do them in order. Negative 4 plus negative 9 is going to give me negative 13 because I add and keep the negative. Now I'm going to have negative 13 plus 1, opposite sign, so subtract. 13 minus 1 is 12. Keep the sign of the 13 because it's bigger. So negative 12 plus negative 7. Now I'm back to same sign. 12 plus 7 is 19, and it's going to be negative because they're both negative. Here's one, negative 1/3 added to 4. I'm going to put the 4 over 1 since I have a negative 1/3. The LCD is going to be 3, so that's going to be negative 1/3 plus 1 times 3 is 3, 4 times 3 is 12. So in this one, I'm going to have a 3 on the bottom because The 3 doesn't change in the denominator. Negative 1 plus 12, subtract and get 11. The 12 is larger, so it stays positive. The sum of negative 7 and its opposite. So sum means to add. So I'm going to take negative 7 plus the opposite of negative 7 is positive 7. And what happens when you have a negative and a positive, the same value? They cancel out and give you a 0. Alright, down at the bottom, we've got one on the left. I'm going to leave that for you to work. You can practice. On the right, we've got 12 more than negative 21. So 12 more than negative 21. Because more than means to add. I've got opposite signs, so subtract. 21 minus 12 is going to give me 9. And the 21 is larger, so it stays negative. Alright, here's some real world problems. Again, money, because money is positives and negatives. Jenny's got $415.40 in her checking account. She wrote checks for $42.50, $5.25, and $216.20. She deposited her paycheck from the part-time job in the amount of $320.45. Write an expression to represent the activity in Jenny's account. So if she's got $415, she's starting out with $415.40 in her account. She's writing all these checks. So those are subtractions. So she's going to subtract $42.50. She's going to subtract $5.25. She's going to subtract $216.20. And then she deposits a paycheck. So that's an addition. So she's going to add $320 with 45 cents. So then it just says simplify, and let's see if she's overdrawn. So let's see. We've got $415.20. We're subtracting our check, so minus $42.50, minus $5.25, minus $216.20. Okay, she's not looking too good so far, so we're going to add the $320, 45 cents that she got for her paycheck. I'm getting, she's got a negative 48.05. She is overdrawn. She has a negative amount of money. Alright, I'm going to leave the one at the bottom for you to try. It's the exact same way. You can see on the left that they took the deposits and added them. They took the checks and added them. And then they did those other two. They took those two values and did the subtraction. You can do it that way if you want. Again, I like to just write them out and do them as I would in my normal checkbook. Alright, so there's adding signed numbers.